live everywhere on netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, November 6th, 2023. Time for another show and another week of shows and all the things that go along with the time. And, oh, yes, right, the time has changed. I think we're all tired of that one by now, but there we are. Clocks have changed. Many clocks have changed themselves, as a matter of fact, and I did see somebody else on one of the social media sites, had put it pretty well, right? Now that all the clocks more or less change themselves these days. There's still ones that don't out there, but, it means, let's see, it means a lot less. Like, all of a sudden, it's not quite as big a deal. You used to have to run around the house setting all these various clocks back an hour, and you had to actually remember that you had to have emails that were going out. Remember to set your clocks back, et cetera, but now they all set themselves back. But this guy was saying my stove clock is still out there screaming, it's all a lie, you're all lying, only I remember, the time changed irrationally. But, and then of course there are those for whom the abstract time change means nothing, as Greg is pointing out to me. Like, Abby means, for Abby, it means nothing except for the fact that she'll be acting now as though it were 10 o'clock. I don't know whether that means she's going to be barking at sanitation engineers who aren't there yet, but we welcome your contributions regardless. And we know that, hey, that can happen. So, okay. What did you all do with your extra hour? I don't know. Nothing really. The first day is pretty disorienting, but after that, not much of a problem. And now I understand, there's people talking again. We'll get rid of one or the other of the two, and there's actual debate going on back and forth. I like I like that it's not dark when I wake up anymore, and that was part of it too, right? The kids going to school and having to go out to the bus stop in the pitch black. That's not great. But then the grousing about, I don't understand, it's dark at 4:30, I can't take it anymore. But that doesn't last too long. By February, it starts picking up. But anyway, we'll settle these things probably right around the time we get around to a solution for the Middle East. So that's good news. It's on the horizon. And at any given moment now, we'll be moving on to those solutions. All right, lots to catch up on. It is Monday of an election week. Tomorrow is the so-called election day, even though with early voting out there, these days the majority of voters cast their ballots on different days, which, as you know, the Republican Party believes is fraud and maybe also anti-religious in some way because it's not in the Bible. And as you know, that's a history book and a literal worldview. So plenty more with that story as well. Mike Johnson still emerging under the watchful eye of the researchers trying to find out a little something about the person who's second in line to the presidency. And it's getting weirder with every possible in every possible way and with every passing minute. Talk of the town, sort of an evening topic, not really for me a great morning topic. I just think it's maybe whatever, but I guess what was Rolling Stone reporting on it? I guess the blandest and least I don't know what, titillating, is that right, even the word for it, way of describing it. All right, so for whatever reason it emerges that Mike Johnson has in the recent past, I think, told reporters, and I guess it's Rolling Stone that found this, archived material, that, one of the things that you do as a regular Christian fellow is you team up with your son and you promise one another that you're going to, as they put it, monitor one another's porn intake, like internet porn intake, which, okay, but not okay also. I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're gonna have this sort of weird partnership. I don't know. Is it better than it be in the family? You should really just not bother with the whole thing. But I guess this is the inevitable evolution of other weirdnesses, like the internet famous Christian side hug, which was always a fun activity to watch people engage. Does anybody remember that? Or does anybody remember that? They decided, I guess, that just hugging people, well, there's too much danger of exposure of, frontal proximity. And so a Christian would hug their friend from the side so that if there was any bodily contact, it was only your hip. Whatever. I don't know, but that was that. And then I remember that there was a rage for a while that there were sort of daddy-daughter chastity pledge dances of some kind. And I guess that from there, it's not that big a leap anymore to, you know what you should do with your son? And, I don't know. And that's why they keep arresting these people as, weirdos and pervs, which is, bad news for the movement, you would think, but well, nothing stops these guys. Anyway, just so you know, there's uncomfortable conversation going on around Mike Johnson again, and probably by the end of the day, we'll find out something about animal sacrifice as well. So who knows? Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here, despite the fact that it's like 14 o'clock or something on our natural clocks. Good morning, and thank you for keeping standard with standard time.
Well, it's Abby's standard time.
Yeah.
The morning starts when she wants to go out. And
right.
I talked to her about the difference, for example, between daylight saving time, daylight savings time, the way I pronounce it, because that's how I was brought up.
Yeah, me too.
Eastern Standard Time. And she doesn't care. She wants to go out. She wants to go out.
Oh, yeah. Going out for the dogs, they're timed. Their bodies are timed for that. And apparently, according to the internet, cats want food early.
Yeah, so, well, it's either that or go on the carpet in the living room. So out she goes.
Yeah,
whatever the neighbors think.
Right. So, all right, time to get used to it. And in a few weeks, it'll all be just the same. And do the squirrels know any better what time it is?
They know because Abby goes out and barks.
Ah, all right.
She announces that she's outside. I mean, that's part of the deal. She's got to tell the deer that they really should not have been in her yard last night.
Wow. Okay. Well, as long as everybody's on notice, that's good.
Yep. But, everybody else's dog is doing the same thing.
No problem.
So this is Newtown. We have a big election coming up tomorrow.
Okay.
It's all about school boards.
Yes.
You may remember Newtown was one of the towns that talked about actually banning certain books because we don't know why, like Flamer, for example, because it was porn, except no.
Okay. Well, Mike Johnson has to tell you if his son reads it and vice versa.
Right. So. The reason I'm not spending a whole lot of time on Mike Johnson and those comments is because the people like Sam Perry and some of the other scholars that I follow on the internet who follow religion issues, evangelical issues, polling, PRRI, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
I'll say, look, this is a pretty common evangelical thing.
Yeah.
I looked at it and said, okay, well, I'm not an evangelical. I don't get it.
Right.
And I'm just moving on.
No, it's important only, it's important if you log on and everybody's like, hey,
Mike
the
Johnson
Speaker of the House loves. Yeah. He didn't make it up is what they're saying. And that's important to know that, okay, well, there are actually thousands of people who actually do this. And let's say reserving judgment on that for the time being. It's important a little something about what lots of people are into. And I want you to know, if you wake up in the morning and you're like, Speaker of the House, porn, something, he didn't do anything wrong.
I thought you were going to go with the bigger story, which is that he doesn't have a bank account.
We did that one last week, a little bit, again,
but,
sort of
but
like,
that's
here's
the bigger
thing.
story. And that's what people are talking about.
Maybe, unless that's where his porn is, in which case it's the same story. I don't really know how
Roger
that would
Sullenberger,
work,
who broke that story
safe deposit
for
box?
HuffPost, was on one of the podcasts, Matt Robison's podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
Rich Schechter and Matt Robison have this podcast that they do on YouTube. And Sullenberger was talking about the fact that there's really no good explanation for it. He's not that poor. And either he's hiding something or he's lying about, where his money is. Or the worst is he really is that poor, which means he's completely and totally open to being influenced by all sorts of people.
Yes. I mean, well, yeah, that's not like, okay, well, poor people are bad for government. Well, that's not it. It's just,
No, but when you're in that all of a sudden situation, and then, you're so poor you don't even have a bank account, and then somebody just,
it's something to watch.
Bonesaw,
right. Calls you up and
MBS
says,
calls you and says, I got $17 billion for you.
Yeah, I'll build
all you have
ark.
to do is just, take a dispassionate view of what's going on in the Middle East.
Yes.
What do you do?
Yeah. People,
I mean,
that's
the
good
pressure
ark
is
money.
tremendous. That's the point that they were trying to make.
Yeah, and that's why we have the financial disclosure forms, and that's why it's worrisome even if it's like, well, he has a bank account, he's just not telling us about it. Well, that's bad too. We need to know so that, we can find out as soon as possible if someone's just bribing you.
So speaking of Mike Johnson, I got 3 stories for you here. The first one is a piece in Substack by historian Thomas Zimmer.
Okay.
In his Substack, which is got the heading Democracy Americana. That's what he calls it.
All right. That's porn, by the way. Just officially.
And he writes, Faith and Family versus Democracy. On the normalization of Mike Johnson, the media's inclination to accomplish and accommodate power, and the perpetuation of real American extremism.
Oh.
Right. Well, animates real the man who rose through the latest round of Republican speaker chaos in the House to become one of the nation's most powerful politicians. What do you need to know about him? What should you expect from Mike Johnson? According to the Washington Post, Faith and Family.
What do you wish you didn't know about him? I have a new story about that.
That's right. On Sunday, one of the nation's leading papers published a dispatch from Shreveport, Louisiana, titled House Speaker Mike Johnson's Louisiana Hometown Guided by Faith and Family, ostensibly an investigation into Johnson's roots, written by a Post reporter whose beat is described as red states. Yet the final product is indistinguishable from a political ad campaign for the politician at the center of the reporting or from a sympathetic home story for a reality TV contestant. This is a rather bizarre kind of political journalism. It's reporting in the sense that a reporter goes to a place, collects impressions and interviews, but the result is a tendentious collage that entirely obscures that which it's supposedly set out to illuminate. And the reason to dwell on this piece is not that it's uniquely awful or that the author's singularly inept, if only. On the contrary, this reporting is indicative of pathologies that characterize too much of mainstream political journalism and the political discourse in general, a tendency to launder and normalize extremism for a broader audience. That's an important topic given that Trump is running for president. An impulse to accommodate and naturalize power, no matter who it and where it resides, and an inclination to perpetuate ideas that form the bedrock of the ethno-religious nationalism that's galvanized Trump. The headline accurately reflects the framing and general thrust of the piece. In Northwest Louisiana, we are being told early on, people navigate their lives by family and faith.
Oh. And porn. The
politician raised here shares a heavy reliance on both family and faith, the pillars of American society. Who could object to that?
Right.
Not the first witness to whom we're being introduced. Meet Gigi Johnson, 69, the speaker's mother.
Yeah, well, she won't.
Last week on the show, Johnson saw her son's selection in spiritual terms. God did this. It's so good for America.
Okay.
Wait. Does that actually mean a staunch conservative who championed religious causes? The piece offers one sentence to answer that question. A single sentence on the actual record of the man who received so much glowing praise from his friends and neighbors, the man who's now in position to significantly shape the nation's politics. Although more low profile than other Donald Trump supporters, he played a pivotal role in efforts to overturn the 2020 election and opposes abortion rights, gun control, and same-sex marriage, views shared by many supporters at home. About the other parts of his record. A pivotal role in the attempt to nullify a democratic election, opposing gun control, that's a religious cause? Or is there more going on?
I don't know. Where's Mom again?
But here's the important part. They're all views shared by many supporters at home, we're being told. And to be fair, the election was stolen and Joe Biden is an illegitimate president.
Oh.
My words, not the articles. But that's a view that people share there at home.
Yes.
So, what are you doing?
I don't know.
They don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I guess it's just like a holdover. There was a time when that was a standard thing to do for sort of a new politician who emerges on the scene. You just tell about his background. Mostly it was because, well, this is a public figure. They usually more or less work in between, these bounds of decency and rationality, and we all do. And the Washington consensus says he's a guy and he's got a family and these are them, and he has a bank account and he used to work in business, and mostly he doesn't steal stuff. All right, let's go on. Yeah, later on, if we find the gold bars, we'll let you know.
We haven't yet identified where he's stealing stuff from.
Right. But now, of course, I don't know, different breed of people, and of course, where everybody, flying the flag of outsider. Well,
here's a new guy. Let's give him a honeymoon.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. I mean, especially if he's running as...
That's not your job as a newspaper.
I'm an outsider running against the system, the very system that says that, yes, people who rise to this level are just normal people.
I'm an outsider like Mike Gates. I'm a normal person like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, right. You're gonna have to look deeper. That is it's an outdated model. It's just not working.
Right, so he's just pointing that out. So does Will Bunch in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Completely independently written, but same theme. With the world on fire, a cowardly, timid news media is a threat to U.S. democracy. News organizations are using cowardly words to describe killing abroad, fascism at home, and downplaying the danger to democracy.
Oh, okay.
Now, there was a shocking and incredibly important story on the front page of the New York Times last week. As reported by an A-team of journalists, including 2 Pulitzer Prize winners, the Times warned its readers that Donald Trump, if returned to the White House in 2025, is grooming a new team of extremist government lawyers who would be more loyal to their dear leader than the rule of law and could help Trump install a brand of American fascism. But you didn't hear anything about this? That's not surprising. The editors at the Times made sure to present this major report in the blandest, most inoffensive way possible. Staying true to the mantra in the nation's most influential newsroom that the 2024 election shouldn't be covered any differently, even when U.S. democracy is on the line. Trump allies want a new style of lawyer if he returns to power.
Yes.
As if maybe they were talking about colorful, drawling Southerners with seersucker suits.
Yeah, different kind. Well, right. It's a different kind of lawyer. One that doesn't depend on the law quite so much. I'm tired of that stuff.
That new style of lawyer, pro-Trump, America First zealot, who thinks the ultra-conservative lawyers bred in the Federalist Society are too soft to carry out their leader's autocratic call for a final battle against the deep state, was described numbingly by the Times as, quote, more aggressive legal gatekeepers.
Yes. I know.
I mean, just amazing stuff.
Right. It's...
That's when you don't want to say he's a liar.
Yeah. Why not?
He worked the truth. He dissembled.
Yes, sure.
He's a freaking liar, right to your face. Why don't you just say so?
I don't know. It's not like he's on trial for 50 different crimes.
Their dangerous anti-democratic mission was blandly outlined as a plan to, quote, take control of the government in a way unseen in presidential history.
Yeah.
It's like they put together the January 6th report by the January 6th committee. They sent it to the Times, and the editors went through it and sanitized everything.
Yeah. Well, they just have different methods. Like I was reminded in my reading about the Middle East today, there was that different methodology that they chose in Egypt when they decided that Anwar Sadat shouldn't be the president anymore. It was just a different approach.
Right. By the Mark Jacob, who used to be a editor at the Chicago Tribune.
Oh.
And now a commentator online. He used to be a Republican. I'm only voting Democratic now. Trump is why. Let's just be clear. I don't have to love anything and everything that the Democrats do. It's just this is what you need.
Yeah.
That's Mark Jacobs' viewpoint in public.
Enough. You don't have to love it all if you've always been voting for it.
Mark Jacobs says, let's go over this New York Times story using overly tidy language. I'll translate, he says.
Ooh, okay.
A new style of lawyer means fascists.
Yeah, that's
aggressive legal gatekeepers means Roy Cohen-style crooked lawyers. Take control of the government in a way unseen in presidential history. Overthrow democracy.
Yes. Right.
I mean, just say so.
I don't know. I don't know why they don't do that. I know that makes them nervous, but I mean, so should overthrowing democracy.
Will Bunch throws in this as well. he would very much like to see less killing of Palestinian civilians, as we all.
Well, that would be nice. Yes.
But he says, and when you're looking at this issue in terms of how the media takes on, describing things, the Onion's take felt more honest and heartful than many serious news headlines. The Onion says, the Onion stands with Israel because it seems like you get in less trouble that way.
Used to be true, maybe not so much anymore, but yeah. I mean,
it's still true if you look at the polls.
It's still kind of the way to. It's amazing. That's how complicated and fraught the situation is. Only the Onion can come out of this, with any sort of respectability after saying something like that.
Right.
Oh my God. All right. Yes.
And I was it caught my eye. There was some polling this morning. I'll see if I can actually catch it, but it was pretty interesting. And I'm not sure where it's from. Let's see.
Oh, is it this red-blue chart thingy that?
No, that's the New York Times.
I was wondering where that was
something a little different.
Okay,
and was just asked. It's possibly from a CBS News poll, and which was also out over the weekend, similar to what the New York Times poll said. We'll get to that. I just don't think that's the most important story in the world, even though everybody's treating it as the most important story in the world.
We're here to fix that.
So this was Matthew Gertz, not Matthew Gates, Matthew Gertz.
That guy, all right. I know.
Looking at the CBS News poll with the following two questions. Do you think Joe Biden's recent statements and actions toward Israel have shown too much support for Israel? 24%. The right amount of support for Israel? 44%.
Mm-hmm.
Not enough support for Israel? 32%.
Oh.
Okay. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling the current conflict? Approve 44, disapprove 56.
Well, that's our healthcare problem.
So my point is a plurality of people think he's doing exactly the right amount. That same 44% who thinks he's giving the right amount of support for Israel are the people who approve. Yes. The people who disapprove, the 56%, either think he's doing too much or too little.
Right.
Now that goes with the job. You can be doing exactly the right thing, and a plurality of people will think so. And because you're president, it's your fault that there's still war.
Yes.
The thing is, that's temporary. I mean, I go back to the UAW strike.
Oh, all right.
On the day that Biden was walking the picket line, had you asked, do you think Joe Biden's recent actions toward the UAW are too much support, the right amount, or too little support? Or do you approve or disapprove of Joe Biden's approach to the UAW strike? You would have gotten the same numbers.
Yeah, probably. Too much, too little.
The point is it's temporary. After the strike, all of a sudden, what he did looks pretty good.
Yeah.
At the time, not so much.
Yeah, true.
So when you do a poll and you get an impression of what's going on today, that doesn't tell you how people are going to feel about it 2 months from now or a year from now. A year from now being important because that's when the November election is. And so, that goes back to how are you handling things and what's the public thinking of you right now? And just to set up the recent polling that we got, which we'll do after the break, there was a great set of headlines that people had collected from October and November 2011 before the 2012 election. Oh, I'll just read you 4 of those.
They had headlines back then?
Is Obama toast, handicapping the 2012 election?
Yes.
Generic Republican continues to lead Obama in 2012 vote. These are all from the same time period. That one was October 14th.
Well, we did get a generic Republican.
The lead is 46-38 among registered voters. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Romney leads in Iowa and New Hampshire, and then a poll of Michigan voters show Romney with apparent lead over Obama.
All right.
Well, Biden isn't Obama, and this isn't 2011. I get that, but I think that, one of the things that's really well summarized in a Huffington Post article talking with Norm Ornstein, again, we'll cover this after the break, is that if you wanted to summarize the Democratic Party in one line, It was sort of a throwaway line towards the end, but they did a great job. Here's the quote. Polls so far out from an election have proven to be unreliable in the past. However, multiple Democrats have expressed concern about the results. I mean, yes, if you needed one line to describe the Democratic Party, that's it.
Yeah. There's no cause for panic. However, there was panic.
Right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's true. Right. Just in anticipation of being asked about polls. Maybe we haven't even taken the polls yet. People are wringing their hands. Yeah. I haven't been asked, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen.
You want to talk elections? Let's talk elections. The elections tomorrow.
Yes. A lot of people emphasizing that. And there's, for a lot of us, there's something everywhere, even if it's, small election, a local election. But given the fact that there are weirdos and proto-Nazis running in places and book banners and who knows what, yes, absolutely, you must pay attention. If there is an election in your town, you need to cast your ballot in it, and don't forget.
Yeah.
So, okay. I cast mine. I went early. I finally did it. I went Friday and took care of business and brought some extra votes with me. And good. I'm on the record. Just
good.
Throw that out there. So, all right. The election settled here in Virginia. I won.
Well, again, we'll find out more. We should expect Republicans to lead when the votes first come in because Election Day votes get counted first.
Yeah.
Then there's early vote in person, and then there's the very democratic write-in, send-in mail ballot, and that comes last. Mm-hmm. And because a lot of these races are expected to be close, that may be the deciding point. Kentucky as well, and of course Pennsylvania. Oh. But that's county level.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here in Virginia, big naval presence. A lot of the voting done by Morse code. It takes a while to, tally all that stuff up, especially on those ballot questions.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow, okay. I was just thinking once again about the oddball story that I started the day with, and I guess it's still going to occupy my mind, of the Mike Johnson and his son monitoring
your mind
one
is
another.
In the gutter.
I guess so. And, that's the low point in town, and it's where everything flows to. So I'm going to end up there eventually. But I was just sort of wondering whether are we going to get a report from the son at any point? Like, how is dad doing? Or is this just something you say? Like, we monitor one another, and then no one really expects that there's going to be certainly no public disclosure of what's going on. Even though Ted Cruz made public disclosures about the porn he likes to look at online occasionally.
Don't use the Palantir. If you see Sauron, he sees you. Don't peer too deeply into this.
I guess. It's meant to distract and confuse and disorient us, and now I don't feel good. So, okay. All right.
So reporter Aaron Zitner from the Wall Street Journal has this piece, Why Republicans Abandoned Their Fight to Repeal Obamacare, with the note, remember when repeal and replace Obamacare was a big GOP applause line? Not anymore. Oh. Americans are more open to a government role in health and other markets now. There's a lot of underlying forces here that are working in Democrats' favor, be it Dobbs or the acceptance after all this time of the popular Obamacare, which people refuse to say is popular because it's popular, But you're so used to saying unpopular Obamacare that like you can't wrap your head around the fact that it's actually very popular now.
Sure, like popular.
We talked about this on the show
George
last week.
Bush.
It's one of the things that helped the UAW in terms of how they did their strike.
Yes. Why?
Why? Because if you don't have to worry about health care, you don't have
right.
to insist that I'm going on strike until I get my benefits.
Right.
That's an add-on request that if you don't get it, but you get your pay wages, that's fine. I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, I did see you mentioned over the weekend that the new contract that UAW has negotiated for their workers at, I guess as you mentioned it, all of the big three manufacturers. Did you see the end date that they put on that?
No.
That was a big deal of the weekend. They also all the contracts terminate in I forget what the year is. It's like a 5-year contract, 2008 maybe. They all terminate on April 30th, 2028. The idea actually, being overtly circulated that and the first day the contract expires and the first day that there might have to be any strike action, if necessary, would be May Day, May 1st, 2028. And that Sean Fain?
Sean Fain.
Every time I say
As
it,
opposed to Sinn Féin.
Right. I say, well, that's not right. But anyway, actually put out a letter of some kind and saying, and if we end up if in 5 years, we still end up having, just 5 years from now, we still end up having to go on strike again to prove our point. We would invite other unions across the country to join us in this action, which is something we haven't seen in quite a while and is even ostensibly illegal.
It's a great year for unions and labor, so yeah. Interesting.
Anyway, very interesting and setting something up. And finally, I guess when tomorrow rolls around and I'm not talking election, but talking about government shutdown and the way they choose their deadlines is strategic too. So now you're seeing labor do the same thing. Very interesting.
And before we get into all the poll stuff, I want to mention this one from Sung-Min Kim, who's now over at AP. I knew her when she was a Politico editor. And was my editor as we used to do a back and forth with us and conservatives back in the day when people were speaking to each other.
All right.
She notes Mike Johnson clashed with White House officials, Democratic lawmakers, and some Republicans inside the Situation Room over his strategy on Israel aid. He was listening to a degree, but he was also bringing forth many of the MAGA Republican viewpoints, said Representative Meeks. So, it's interesting that you have somebody who has such a lovely down-home description of, how mom and apple pie he is, including from mom. That's basically not up to the job. Like, this is big boy stuff.
Well, back home in Shreveport, we used to say that I didn't sound like I was from Shreveport, for one thing. But
Shreveport, New Jersey.
He's got a very generic, I guess, TV news announcer kind of nondescript, from nowhere accent. That's interesting. But I would imagine that's a lawyer or politician will want that.
Anyway, as we mentioned, Virginia, Kentucky, governor race, and the county level stuff in Pennsylvania to see who decides how the votes are counted are all super important, and we'll have more to say about that on Wednesday, I hope. Which is to say, I hope by then we figure out who won.
Right.
But I have to read you this trio of headlines from the New York Times after their poll, which showed Biden trailing in key swing states. And to give you a flavor of what's going on, this one's from John Della Volpe, who does the youth vote. Joe Biden is in trouble, says the headline. Although the article isn't that bad. Talks about the fact that here's are the things you need to do in order to,
hello, fellow young people.
Get back on where you need to be. The next one is David French. Joe Biden knows what he's doing.
Okay.
And this is talking about his approach to the Middle East and why Biden's realism is far more important than what you read online about people protesting. Of course, David French is a conservative.
Yes.
And David Leonhardt has perhaps the more interesting of the trio. What can Biden do? So you have to read those like one after the other. Joe Biden's in trouble. Joe Biden knows what he's doing. What can Biden do? The president's strategic options for 2024. The important part that Leonard picks out, he's got 4 things he talks about, but the first one is the most important. There's an anti-MAGA majority. We saw it in 2018, 2020, 2022, and we need to see it again.
All right.
Once the campaign picks up, Trump's behavior will get more attention, partly because some of his criminal trials will likely have begun. In the Times poll, about 6% of voters in battleground states, enough to swing the results, said they would abandon their support for Trump if he's convicted.
Okay. Nice of him to offer that.
Right. Number 2 is the Roe factor. Perhaps Biden's biggest advantage is he could overtake Trump simply by winning back disaffected voters who normally support Democrats. Beyond abortion, a populist campaign might also help Biden, given that many disaffected Democrats have modest incomes. Nate Cohen from the New York Times says.
All right.
Emphasize low taxes that many rich people pay, in other words. Which is why the move by this guy you probably never heard of, Mike Johnson, to try to make aid to Israel, which is a plurality and arguably a popular point of view from the American public, to merge that with defund the IRS, such a bad move, because Biden can point to that and said, this is what they stand for and this is what I stand for.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Number 3, issue weaknesses, which is Biden hasn't, according to David Leonhardt, he's, and I'm trying to remember who said this. I think it was Matt Iglesias over the weekend. Biden basically embraced and appointed a lot of left-leaning people in the White House and went with their advice on domestic programs.
Yes.
And left the moderate center-right people in international positions, and basically is doing the old school international approach. And this approach worked well for both of them until now.
I can't as much as I am inclined to find a place to disagree with Iglesias, that sounds right.
Yeah. So what in that context Dave Leonhardt talks about is that Biden has domestically tried to appease left-leaning voters at the risk of alienating moderates. Like a pound of bacon, he writes, costs an average of $7 in the U.S., 21% more than when Biden took office. Coffee beans has risen 33%. A gallon of gas is 72% more expensive. Inflation affects everybody, so there's a sour mood. A president can't do much to bring down prices, but Biden's taken steps to reduce energy prices, which is a big deal. Because if you bring down energy prices, everything else eventually comes down too. However, the way he did that was oil projects. If you emphasize that, you alienate young and left-leaning voters. But if you emphasize the fact that you're taking steps to bring down inflation and bring down the price of everything, you win over, theoretically, everybody, including moderates.
People who have
Biden's
to spend
been
money.
reluctant to do that because of this dichotomy between, empowering the left-leaning people in the White House. So they don't want to emphasize the fact that, it's like his border stuff. He's said, well, I'm going to take some steps on the border to bring things, in balance. Why are you doing that? Because there's an election coming up. If you do things and you take steps to address problems, you're going to alienate somebody. So he doesn't want to talk about it. But in fact, it might be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And what people care about are the results.
Yeah. It's not much of a strategy. Well, we need to win the presidency so that I don't take steps or address problems, because that'll just make people upset. Well, all right. So, yes.
So you have to figure out how to deal with those issues.
Sure, of course.
The fourth is the age problem. Not much you can do about that, but he just has to get out. Stop trying to protect him. Let him get out and be Joe Biden.
Is that happening?
The Irish guy with the big mouth who keeps talking. People like him when he does that. And the White House doesn't let him.
Oh. Well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. The other guy seems to delight his crowds by running around as the old guy who says the wrong thing all the time. So,
well, the pundits aren't always right. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that, the one thing in that Leonhardt analysis that I think is absolutely true is that there is an anti-MAGA majority. My theory of the case is that campaigns matter, not because I'm a campaign person. I've only peripherally ever worked on campaigns. I don't, hold myself up as an expert, but I do think that they matter a lot more than people give them credit for. A bad campaign will sink you. A good campaign can bring out bad parts about your opponent that you forgot and emphasize the good parts about the person running, your candidate, which you also forgot. And in that regard, I think that campaigns matter. And the place that I would point to in the New York Times polling, for example, which showed that 5 out of 6 swing states prefer Trump right now, the one that didn't is the one that was the closest, which is Wisconsin. Or, at least one of the closest, if not the closest. And, why is that important? Because Wisconsin had this whole Wisconsin Supreme Court race and then controversy about whether or not that judge was going to be impeached.
Right.
That seems to be on hold at the moment, so all the outcry about it seemed to have helped. My point is the Wisconsin Democrats are extremely competent, and they have activated the Democratic voters in Wisconsin. Now when you ask them a poll about Biden, they understand the issues. They just have to, vote on it.
All right.
And they vote Biden.
Well,
by a small margin, but nonetheless Biden.
Yeah.
So, assume for the moment the poll is accurate. We're not going to get into,
all right,
problems with the poll. There is problems with the poll. They're a good pollster, mostly done by landline, whatever that tells you, yada, yada, yada. The idea that he's 5 points behind in Michigan, but 2 points ahead in Wisconsin seems odd. But one explanation, if it's accurate, is that, Wisconsin voters are energized. They're an example of what would happen to the rest of the country once campaigns start. They haven't started yet, so you don't see that activation. So you're getting these results whereby right now, as many of the experts will tell you, like Norm Ornstein, that right now polling is reflecting Biden performance, referendum on Biden. But when you get to the election, the job of the Biden campaign is to make it a referendum on Trump, and Trump has given them plenty of ammunition to do that.
Okay.
So you can't really poll until that happens and know what's going on. All you can do is know what's going on right now before the campaign starts. Okay, fine. We now know what's going on before the campaign starts. Does that predict November 2024? No, it does not.
Okay.
Do Democrats worry about it based on that? Sure, because we're Democrats.
Well, we'll worry about it when we have the results.
That's why it's so funny to say, well, we need bad polls because that way Democrats become complacent otherwise, and we need to run like we're 10 points down. And you get those polls that say that, and everybody freaks out.
That's true.
You just told us you want to run like you're 10 points. Well, you're 10 points down. Oh, my God.
Yeah, I guess there's that. And then also like, well, that's the problem is
people say that because I see what happens when you're 10 points down. It's not good, folks.
I know that's good. It's too interesting. We need polls to tell us to run like we're 10 points down. Okay, here's one. No, God. And then on the other hand, if we don't have them, then Democrats become complacent. Oh, really? Have you met a complacent Democrat lately? I can't believe it.
Have you met an actual Democrat?
Right. I'm complacent. This is normally I'm tearing my hair out and vomiting. So I'm complacent in that sense. Nothing's changed.
Right.
But okay. That's odd, to say the least.
But it is what it is.
Okay.
I have a little piece about that, too, in a moment. It was looking at the Middle East, but same principle. So we'll get to that. I want to do this one first. This is HuffPost, formerly known as the Huffington Post.
Okay.
I think they're going to call themselves X now because, everybody is.
Oh. Yeah, sure. They need a new name.
Like X in the morning for your show.
X
You're going to rename it.
Oh, right. Yeah, too trendy.
Well, you were X before there was an X, so,
That's right.
Copyright infringement.
Yeah, well, Malcolm disagrees.
Yeah. Veteran political scientist predicts how Trump-Biden polling will evolve. So that's what you get after the Joe Biden's in trouble, Joe Biden knows what he's doing. You get veteran political scientist, that's Norm Ornstein, predicts how Trump-Biden polling will evolve. Norm Ornstein says he doesn't want to sugarcoat recent polls and the reasons behind the numbers, which we will have to explore for many, many years. Like, why do people accept that a fascist like Trump might even be viable? But what he says is one of the things I think is very clear here is that most voters have paid little or no attention to Donald Trump's legal problems. That'll change when we get criminal trials, and especially if and when we get convictions. And I think in the NBC poll there's actually data there that says 6% of Trump voters would abandon him if he's convicted.
You'd hope for more, but that, of course, would be enough.
In a swing state, a 6% shift is winning versus losing.
Right. I mean, that's the result you actually want. I mean, theoretically, you're like, well, golly, if the guy is convicted of criminal activity,
it was a landslide, 60-40. What's wrong with 40% of the people? What is wrong with it? It's a landslide.
Right. Yeah. That doesn't mean that you should hire those people to run your business or anything. It just means that, okay, you won and be satisfied with that. But yeah, I know it's difficult to accept. Like, he's been convicted of criminal conspiracy to overthrow the government. I mean, come on.
But somebody posted a meme from Instagram, which kind of sums up the issue here.
Okay.
One guy says, "So what do you think of what's going on in the Middle East?" And the other guy says, "My rent is $3,000 a month, and I'm working 6 jobs. I don't give a crap about what's going on in the Middle East." So, it's glib, it's simplistic, and that's where most people get their news.
Yeah, memeified.
So Ornstein says, Ornstein, I forget how he pronounces his name. When you get down to 2 choices and we have one presidential candidate who is for a complete Muslim ban, who is supported in lunch with Nazis or neo-Nazis, and whose criminal convictions, he said, noting that combined with the issue of abortion, voters may end up seeing things differently. And when we see clear choices, I think we'll find a different dynamic. And I think all of that is true. And again, it's the job of the campaign to remind you about Dobbs.
Yeah.
Which didn't go away as an issue because I suspect, despite Mike Johnson's best efforts to make it illegal, in November 2024 and thereabouts, I think people will still be having sex. And as long as they are, I think that abortion issues are still going to be like salient, as we say in the business.
Right. Yeah, it's a popular thing, as it turns out. It's been going on since there were humans, as it happens. So
in fact, there's even a story about this.
There are humans.
Jonathan Swan, Maggie Haberman et al., writing in the New York Times.
How so?
Trump indictments haven't sunk his campaign, but a conviction might.
Okay. I mean,
let me give you that one. I haven't given you that one. There's a lot of good ones in the New York Times. Polls by the New York Times and Siena College show strength in key swing states in part because of concerns about Biden's age, but a conviction could be the difference.
All right. That's the way it should be. So good.
Right.
Now I have a hard time
Trump
believing
leads President Biden in 5 key battleground states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. According to the Times Siena polls, he's eaten significantly into Mr. Biden's advantages among younger Black and Hispanic voters, many of whom retain positive views of the policies Trump enacted as president, and Mr. Trump appears to have room to grow as more voters say they're open to supporting the former president than they are to backing Biden. But the results reveal the complex ways voters continue to view Mr. Trump. The polls found that for the most part, Trump's politically surviving the criminal charges, but if convicted, that's different. The core of Mr. Trump's strength remains his perceived skill at managing the economy, at least compared to Mr. Biden.
How so?
They trust Trump over Biden to manage the economy by a margin of 22 percentage points. If you answer landlines, that's what you tell them.
I guess so.
Jobs are down because Biden didn't know how to handle the pandemic. Jobs are down. That's what makes you tear your hair out.
Yeah. Jobs are A, not down, and B, pandemic, other guy. Sorry, but that's the reality of it.
Mr. Trump, however, remains in a weaker position than such gains might make it appear. If the former president is convicted and sentenced, around 6% of voters across Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin say they'd switch their votes to Biden. That would be enough to decide the election potentially.
Well, all right, I'll take it that way. That'll be fine. I mean, I wouldn't mind if something happened and he decided not to run. That'd be great. But yeah, I guess that's a satisfactory result, right? He gets convicted. A lot of people still say, I still like him. but not nearly enough to even make the election close. Okay.
Right. So here's an example. Dakota Jordan, a
wait.
26-year-old from Maricopa County, did not vote in the 2020 election. He said he'd rather not have Trump in office at all, but given the choices, he'd vote for him over Biden, absent a criminal conviction. But if he's convicted, absolutely no way. I can't elect a criminal as my leader.
Okay, I mean...
And Trump remains broadly unpopular. So that fits in with Leonard's narrative that there is an anti-MAGA majority that just needs to be energized.
Yeah, by convictions, I guess.
That's one way.
How about if we put him in jail in Maricopa
some of the
County?
good stuff you have done.
Oh, okay. You know what? We could bring back Sheriff Joe if we can jail Trump in Maricopa to convince people of the severity of this conviction. And then Sheriff, what's his name, comes back and keeps him outside. Yeah, keep him outside in a tent and wearing pink underwear or something like that. Like all of a sudden, that's sounding like a good idea, maybe. Oh, I'm a hypocrite. Oh well, yeah. Well, it won't happen anyway, so we can just indulge the fun thoughts about it. But if they do that to him, we'll say no, unconstitutional.
Right. Well, I'm just about done with this segment. I do see something I put away that I don't really feel like talking about, but I have.
You can leave it for me.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
For Wednesday.
Did you cover Mike Johnson's Christian law school deanship?
Yes, briefly. Right? Yeah, we did do that. He's
just a weird
tried
guy.
to start one. It was a Trump University, but a law school, and it never opened. Although Trump University opened its doors and stole money. Yes. This one never opened. They took money from donors who knew that they were giving their money away, but they never opened. And yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, I think the theme that I was going with that people were writing about was, I guess he took this job repping the Arc Experience theme park, and I think that may have opened, but I don't know. It sort of fell apart and into bankruptcy and disrepair. And then he went on to start a law school, and that too sort of fell apart. And why not try running the House of Representatives next? So a little bit of a Trump record on business, but he doesn't pretend he's a businessman. He's just a regular guy who can't start a business or run a business. And they're not his businesses, but everything he touches dies. So maybe you've heard of such a person before. And I don't know. I mean, I guess it stands to reason that only after a train wreck like the Republicans just went through, he emerges and, I guess if it all falls apart and he can't manage anything and can't pass anything and can't manage his conference, it'll be all of a piece with his previous career, and we'll all say, should have seen that coming. Right. Don't know.
So I do have a few minutes left. I want to talk about this really interesting piece by Ian Dunt, which is he is a liberal
Ian Dunt.
In the UK.
But Ian could if he wanted to.
Who often comments on politics, both here and in the UK, mostly in the UK, but really interesting guy. He's great when he goes and he gives you his minute-to-minute coverage of what's going on in the House of Commons.
Oh.
He's the guy that clued me in, at least, to this order guy, and how things are done there.
Okay.
So he's wrestling with the idea of, how are you supposed to think about the whole Israel-Hamas situation? And depending upon which atrocity you're looking at any given time, he says it really comes down to are Palestinian lives worth more than Jewish lives, or the other way around? And he's talking about his own complex way of looking at it. He had, pro-Palestinian leanings, but then he saw Jeremy Corbyn and the leftists in Britain take, fairly obvious anti-Semitic positions. And that certainly changed him. He writes, I was in Barcelona at the weekend, and as I walked around the Gothic Quarter, a pro-Palestine demonstration took place. It was a million miles away from Suella Braverman's divisive gibberish about hate marches full of young people of many different backgrounds, angry but compassionate, outraged by the images they'd seen, demanding that it stop.
Yeah.
There have certainly been instances of anti-Semitism on many of these marches, but they're not defined by being anti-Jewish, and it's obscene to see defenders of Israel suggest they are. Hamas is the other. It's a terror organization. It can't be pressured into a change of position by demonstrators marching in European cities, but Israel's part of the in-group. It's us, a liberal democracy, receiving support from Western governments. It potentially could be pressured into a change of position, however unlikely it seems now. And not so long ago, Ian Dunt, I would have been on that protest. I found the whole notion of Israel disturbing. Nothing good would come from a state based on race or religion. But it was the Corbyn years that changed things for me. The sudden outbreak of anti-Semitism and the callow excuses that were made for it. The thing that struck me was that none of it felt new. Suddenly, those days of thinking about a happy-go-lucky, multicultural, one-state solution seemed laughably naive. If this is what lurked in tolerant, moderate Britain, what would it be like elsewhere? And then I realized why Jews needed a homeland. They needed somewhere to be safe. My own naivety has a long history. And then he talks about reading some philosophy, a Jewish philosopher named Isaiah Berlin. He says, nobody ever talks about him. They never will. His views are too difficult to emotionally accept. But he has the advantage of speaking truth. He believed that the world is composed of competing values. Hedonism, tradition, freedom, control, equality, hierarchy, whatever. They exist in cultures which prize certain values above other values. They exist in people who do the same. And they exist in each individual. And we all want things we can't be put together. Maybe we value family, but we've fallen in love with somebody they disapprove of. Maybe we're Ukrainian who wants to fight for their country, but their dad is sick and they have to stay home. So the philosopher Berlin warns you to be wary of those who say that there's a right answer to these questions. He warns you to distrust those who say there's a future utopia where you can fix all of this stuff.
Oh, all right.
They can't be conquered. Life is composed of inevitable tragedy. There'll never be a happy ending. It'll never be solved. Because humanity can't be solved. And that's really at the basis of what's going on here. And it may seem depressing, but in fact, it helps you realize that all those people screaming about, if you would only do it this one way, that's the answer, are probably wrong. And I read this and thought of all the people turning on Bernie because he's not supporting an immediate ceasefire.
Yes, I guess so. That's the way to go with it.
And Bernie's saying it's complicated. How dare you say it's complicated? It's
nuance. What? Yeah. Oh, well, that is interesting for people who haven't had a great deal of experience. You know, I guess that was inevitable for people who were very new to politics and who kind of jumped into that
or to the Middle East.
Yeah, right. That's generally true. But that's the way it is with people who are new to things. It's okay. You'll get old at it. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It occurs to me, I got to look back and see now. I was thinking, oh, well, maybe the thing to do is to turn back to that, to the article about what Trump has in store for 2025. And then I was like, wait a minute, did we read it already? What, did it come out over the weekend? Is that what happened? Because I don't see it immediately in my in pocket, but sometimes things don't actually make it there the way they should. Although maybe I should refresh. But that was a big deal over the weekend. Man, where can I just quickly access this thing? I'm just not sure where it resides. But okay, yeah. Oh, no, that was the lawyer article. But there was something over the weekend. Oh, boy. Now I have to, go back and searching for it. And it should have been, ensconced in Pocket as, the lead article of the day. But maybe if I go over, where would I be most likely to come across this thing so that I could add it? But, I mean, it was... All right, I'll have to check my own social media feed. Because I'm certain I... discussed it and pointed to this article. And, I guess I could waste time while I'm searching just noting that the other headline of the day is the New York Times piece, which once again just sort of, almost comically understating things. But, the New York Times' own Blue Sky entry about its latest news piece on his trials, that is the New York trial that's going on today. He'll be taking the stand today is what's happening. And Ben Protis, Jonah Bromwich, and Maggie Haberman put together the report on it. Trump's credibility, coherence, and control face test on witness stand. Yes, they do. And the way the Times social media accounts took care of that, basically, restating it in a different, with a little extra to it. Donald Trump is expected to take the stand Monday in his civil fraud trial, where his credibility, coherence, and self-control will be tested. Just an alternate version of the same headline, essentially. And of course, so far the best comment that I've seen on that came from, who is this? Brandy Schillace, maybe? Schillace. And, well, golly, I just had to repeat that one because the comment was his test his credibility, coherence, and self-control. His what now? Which one are you referring to? Well, all of them. His credibility, what credibility? His coherence, what coherence? His self-control, now you're just kidding me. You gotta be joking, right? In addition to which, I would say he's probably also literally expected to actually take the stand or to attempt to take the stand. So this belongs to me. I used to be president. Everything in America belongs to me. I'm going to take this and put it in Trump Tower. So that ought to be interesting, all by itself. The article, how long is it? It'd probably be a good launching pad for discussion. And probably also somewhere in here is a link to the story of his plans for outright fascist takeover of the United States government should he win election. No, it is in fact the Washington Post piece. So let's open that one up just because that has to be discussed. We are, I know that over the weekend I definitely was commenting on it. I'm surprised that it didn't make it into Pocket, but sometimes the buttons that I think I pressed don't get pressed. But yeah, it brought out a lot of emotion, to say the least. And I think, we're reminded that this is bad news. And then there's the constant comment. Who is it who's always asking, what would we say if we saw it happening in another country? Or what would we call it if we saw it happening in another country? And of course, obviously, right-wing fascist takeover, military-style coup, what have you. Reminder in the background, there was the January 6th riots, and you really need to get yourself comfortable with the fact that while we'll do everything we can to defeat this at the polls, and that's the first line of defense, it's no longer a guaranteed line of defense. It has been demonstrated already that if they are told in no uncertain fashion that we've gone to the polls, we've taken it to the people, they've decided they don't want you, they'll simply declare that to be fraud and possibly retake it by force. And I guess you need to prepare yourself for it. And for whatever reason, it's still covered in the newspaper as, well, this is within bounds. You are allowed to say that my platform is that America isn't really all that good. Democracy kind of sucks. The Constitution is stupid and weak. And but if you're not the kind of person who just is comfortable saying that, we'll say the Constitution is awesome, and in order to protect it, we need to throw out all of the protections that it gives us in terms of how we select our government. But then we'll do all sorts of freedom-y things after we're done with that. And I guess that's the 94% of Trump voters who, I guess, still say, if he's convicted of these crimes, I'll still vote for him. That we didn't really talk about that being the flip side. Yes, the truth that underlies it all is still that if 6% of Trump voters say, I just can't do it, and either vote the other way or stay home, he will lose. But it does also mean you're looking at that astonishing flip side statistic. 94% of the people who say they want to vote for Trump would say conviction, that's not even real, or I don't care, or it doesn't matter, or it's a badge of honor. And I guess we have to look out for those people. But again, that 94% of them, all totaled, are still far, far less than the rest of us. But I guess it doesn't mean as much if they also are willing to, let's say, fire AR-15s into a crowd while they object. Anyway, so the depressing article of the weekend. Trump and allies plot revenge and Justice Department control in a second term. It's all part of the same program. Advisors have also discussed deploying the military to quell potential unrest on Inauguration Day, and of course every day thereafter. But they're saying basically, they're literally saying day one of a new Trump administration, we would mobilize the military to crack down on our critics or people who would protest our regime. And I don't know what else you would call it at that point. Critics have called the idea under consideration dangerous and unconstitutional. But, in other words, some say this is dangerous and unconstitutional. But on the other hand, we went to Shreveport, Louisiana, and found out that some people say it's as American as apple pie. Who's writing? Isaac Arnsdorf, Josh Dawsey, and Devlin Barrett. Don't know if they're responsible for the headlines or subheaders, but here's how the sanitized version of it. I mean, and no doubt that they, as authors, think they're giving us grave warning, but also no doubt that there will be critics, and they'll be correct, these critics, who say, why don't you just say it already? And we have to be careful because they're plotting a anti-constitutional, and it's not just unconstitutional, anti-constitutional, anti-democratic takeover of the United States if they get anywhere near winning, whether they actually win or not. Or even maybe if they're far away. They'll just say, the fraud was so huge, we had to do this again. Donald Trump and his allies have begun mapping out specific plans for using the federal government to punish critics and opponents should he win a second term, and really even if he doesn't. With the former president naming individuals he wants to investigate or prosecute, and his associates drafting plans to potentially invoke the Insurrection Act on his first day in office to allow him to deploy the military against civil demonstrations. It really doesn't, but he'll just declare that it does, and that the emergency that it seemed to require on its face is just, I declare it to be the case. I'm the commander-in-chief. Let's just go. In private, Trump has told advisors and friends in recent months that he wants the Justice Department to investigate one-time officials and allies who have become critical of his time in office, including his former chief of staff, John Kelly, and former Attorney General William P. Barr. Isn't that amazing? Mr. President, this is illegal and unconstitutional. You can't do it. Oh, yeah? Well, all illegal and unconstitutional. You're under arrest and investigation, and we're going to turn you inside out. Thanks for playing. I mean, it's horrible, but I will say, maybe it's... No, it's still not a silver lining, but I guess it would be real interesting to, I don't know if it would be very satisfactory. Well, you've lost the government, you've lost the democracy, we live in a fascist dictatorship, but William P. Barr sure learned his lesson, and I don't know whether he really will or not, but, that'll be no comfort at the time. Anyway, by the way, there's more. The other people he's going to investigate. Well, one, not surprising given the start of this list, former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley, who also has been outspoken of late on his criticism. He was kind of in no position to be critical about him while he was still Chief of Staff. Though you might say, well, it is interesting. Like the whole premise of Trump's plan is, well, yes, it is practice, it's policy, it's tradition, it's absolutely necessary to democracy norm that the Justice Department not be politicized. But we're saying, to hell with that, let's do it anyway, because it's good for us, and we want the things that we can bring about by ignoring all the rules. And then, I'll just remind you, okay, so General Milley at the time is like, well, no, I'm going to honor the traditions, and I'm going to honor our chain of command, and I won't, as an active military officer and the top military officer, break that tradition and tell you that Donald Trump is a dangerous fascist and a dictator wannabe, and we have to do everything we can to prevent him from coming to power or remaining in power now, even in the end of his first term. But that would be awful, right? I mean, we all would have been shocked at the time. But the amazing thing is that, like I said, one team is like, let's throw all that out. Let's put our political enemies in jail. Let's arrest, exile, execute all of them. Let's mobilize the military to crack down on people who protest this enormous departure from our democratic institutions. And the other side is, well, that is horrible, and we need to do anything we can to prevent it, except breaking all of the norms that they are threatening to break. We have to wait until they break them. And then after they break them, if we somehow manage to, say, regain control at some point, then it would be right back to the norms. It's like the blue slips all over again. We don't prosecute our former presidents. We don't bring people like this to trial. We don't hold people accountable for war crimes or unconstitutional breaches of basic American freedoms here at home or anywhere, for that matter. We don't do that. That's look forward, not backwards-ism. We've already been through that. And the other side is, let's just murder everybody. And it's kind of hard to justify. But anyway, in case you were wondering where, I got to go back to the other point. Oh, yes. So we said John Kelly, Bill Barr, Mark Milley are sort of the unsurprising targets of Trump's wrath. And maybe you say that's terrible. It's horrible, but they're going to get their comeuppance. And they all sold their souls, to serve him, and good. In a way, I don't know that Mark Milley really did do that. I guess that's the exception. Barr and Kelly certainly did. And I guess the last example is another person who did in fact sell their soul to join his team, but not in the government. But also, just to give you an idea of how far back, like the grudges he holds. He holds a grudge against everybody in the world, and he never lets go of any of them. But I mean, I think this describes like as petty as he gets. I got to look this guy up too, just to be, it's not that I forget who he is, but, rather I forget exactly what cases it was that he was involved in. But, one of the people, in addition to the high profile names of Mark Milley, John Kelly, and Bill Barr that he wants to go after and prosecute if I'm president again. The other one is, remember when his lawyer, he had that goofball lawyer, one of 10,000 goofball lawyers that he's had, Ty Cobb. It was goofball because, oh my God, they named their kid Ty Cobb. Well, they did 100 years ago. But also, he was a bit of a goofball, and he had that wacky mustache, and he's a bow tie nut. So that's kind of weird all by itself. Yeah, I mean, what a mix. And you know who else? I want to prosecute the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff because he didn't put the military behind me. I want to prosecute even my own former attorney general because he didn't put the Department of Justice behind me. I want to prosecute my own chief of staff because he kept telling me I couldn't do this. Okay, but chief of staff of the White House, attorney general, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and also a lawyer that I had at one point where I got, this case went really badly for me. And I think he should be, well, what did he do for Trump? He was involved in the Mueller special counsel investigation. I forget already this parade of lawyers who have come and gone, but Wikipedia to the rescue, reminding me here. Cobb joined the White House to manage matters related to FBI Director Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 United States elections. Cobb was part of the White House internal legal team and reported directly to President Trump. Cobb said that he accepted the White House assignment because, quote, it was an impossible task with a deadline. What? He further elaborated that he had rocks in his head and steel balls, which I think meant he was supposed to be talking about how manly he was. Not that there were steel balls as well as rocks in his head, but that's what the structure of the sentence implies, and I can't disagree that that was a real possibility. Cobb was recommended to Trump by John Dowd, who was a member of his private legal team. I don't see anywhere that Trump is saying he wants to prosecute John Dowd, but there you have it. Cobb said there was no reason to believe that Trump was personally under investigation, and they're in full cooperation mode and have been directed to fully cooperate and get this over with as quickly as possible. Why is he mad exactly? Oh, well, I guess Cobb. Okay, well, in May of 2018, Cobb announces his retirement as the White House special counsel at the end of the month. He issued a statement that it has been an honor to serve the country. And then in October of 2018, he said that he did not think the Mueller investigation was a witch hunt, as Trump had repeatedly called it in the press. He repeated that assessment on an ABC News interview in March of 2019, adding that he thought that Mueller was an American hero. I mean, and I guess that's it. And then there's later criticism of Trump. What's the latest? Cobb also condemned Trump's repeated false claims that he lost the 2020 presidential election and that it was the result of voter fraud, as well as his attempts to overturn the election. So after Trump was indicted in August of 2023, maybe this is it because he said something recent. After he was indicted on charges that he conspired to defraud the government and disenfranchise voters, Cobb wrote on Facebook that on the state of mind issues, there will be evidence from more than one or two witnesses that Trump acknowledged that he lost. That's just the cherry on top of a mountain of evidence that would satisfy the reckless disregard or should have known standards that are alternatives to proving actual knowledge. He knew. He is toast. D.C. jury, he is done until he wins the election and the fun begins all over again. So he actually, sees what's coming, and that's why he's in Trump's crosshairs again now. Okay. That helps me understand how he threw it. But I thought it was incongruous, and it is, and I think that's funny. I just, minus the fascism and the end of the country. But, it's interesting and very telling, and it's a hell of a list that they put together. So where were they going with this list? In private, Trump has told people that he wants to investigate people, including Kelly, Barr, Cobb, and Milley. This, according to people who have talked to him. I don't know why you would talk to him, but they have. And they, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity, of course, or else they'll get prosecuted as well. Trump has talked of prosecuting officials at the FBI and the Justice Department. For a person familiar with the matter said, in public, Trump has vowed to appoint a special prosecutor to, quote, go after President Biden and his family, which they've been doing with great gusto, but not as a special prosecutor to this point. But don't worry, whatever, he's going to do it anyway. The former president has frequently made corruption accusations against them that are not supported by available evidence. To facilitate Trump's ability to direct Justice Department actions, his associates have been drafting plans to dispense with 50 years of policy and practice intended to shield criminal prosecutions from political considerations. Critics have called such ideas dangerous and unconstitutional, and indeed they are. It would resemble a banana republic if people came into office and started going after their opponents willy-nilly, said, who are we looking at here? Sai Krishna Prakash, a constitutional law professor at the University of Virginia, who studies executive power. It's hardly something we should aspire to. And yet 94% of his supporters would say, hey, we'll stick with him even though, in fact, because he's promising such a thing. Much of the planning for a second term has been unofficially outsourced to a partnership of right-wing think tanks in Washington. And by the way, is there really any need to discuss it in terms of planning? I mean, maybe it's scary if, they have plans to do this thing. You can't let this happen. This is their plan. On the other hand, is it a plan or is it just, if we win, we'll just say, I'm the king of everything now and everything I say goes and we're going to get the military to enforce it. And it doesn't really need a plan per se, so much as a list of arrest, and incarcerate, convict, exile, murder, bone saw, whatever. This list of people. That's the plan. My plan is we'll kill anybody who gets in the way. And if you want to make a list of people that you think should be killed right away, go ahead. But that's not really a plan per se. But they actually have a plan and they're like, we're going to, people will say that's unconstitutional. And I'll say, insurrection acts. And okay, that's my plan. Oh, it doesn't say it, right? Or for that matter, you lost the election. Oh yeah, well, independent state legislature, but that doesn't mean anything. You still lost the election. Oh yeah, well, and I don't know, reminds me of the courtroom scene of Good Will Hunting. Like, you just say an ancient sounding thing and say, point is, it means the opposite of what it means. And we're going to, I guess the idea in Good Will Hunting was he was actually supposedly right about it. I don't know that he really was. Anyway, the point really here is they're just going to spew out things and say, that's the planning part. You lawyers, find some smart sounding things that we can yell in case, maybe reporters will say, oh, well, actually, maybe it is constitutional, at least for a little while. You yell those things. That's the planning part. So, dubbed Project 2025, which would be, of course, when he's inaugurated, should he either win the election or just declare it a victory. So the group's developing a plan, I would have quote-unquote planned that one, to include draft executive orders that would, among other things, deploy the military domestically under the Insurrection Act, according to a person involved in these conversations who should be arrested, and internal communications reviewed by the Washington Post. I mean, as long as we're arresting or plans are on for arresting political opponents, wouldn't it be ironic to arrest the people planning those things right now and then say, this was actually your idea? But of course, then we'd hear it from the people who want the Constitution. So anyway, like me, the law, last updated in 1871, the Insurrection Act that is, authorizes the president to deploy the military for domestic law enforcement. So go ahead and do it. The proposal was identified in internal discussions as an immediate priority, the communications showed. In the final year of his presidency, some of Trump's supporters urged him to invoke the Insurrection Act to put down the unrest after the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020, but he never did it. And by the way, it was also an explicit part of the January 6th plan, right? We'll start the riot, and if anybody comes to either counter our activity or put an end to our riot, you should then invoke the Insurrection Act. And on top of that, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and others said, you should then use the Insurrection Act to deputize us to act militarily on behalf of the Trump regime. I don't believe there's anything in the Insurrection Act that would permit that, but they said, well, to hell with law at that point. You just say that it's A-okay if the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers start killing people, and we'll just start doing it. And even if it comes down to it, oh yeah, as it turns out, the Insurrection Act doesn't say that anywhere. There's no possible justification for it whatsoever, and we'll be convicted in court if our defense is the Insurrection Act. Could you then pardon us instead? Well, as long as there's pardons out there as a backstop, fine. Why don't we say it's the Insurrection Act? If we get a dummy judge or Matthew Kaczmarek or whatever his name is, then we'll get off the hook. Terrific. And if we don't, then pardon us. So where were we? Oh, yeah. So they first started with the Insurrection Act after George Floyd was murdered and people were out protesting, hey, you can't just murder black people whenever you feel like it. Oh, yeah, well, you're all under arrest or whatever. And then he tried it again on January 6th, but I don't know if they even mentioned that here. Trump has publicly expressed regret about not deploying more federal force and said he would not hesitate to do so in the future, even though you and I all remember that when there were protests in D.C. about George Floyd's murder, they brought in like badgeless, nameless, ID-less supposed federal officers that may or may not have been from the Bureau of Prisons, and they helicoptered them in and just like, I guess, threatened to, because they were not wearing any identification and wouldn't even say which agency they were from, people were afraid maybe they'll just start shooting people. I don't know. Maybe it worked. And then, of course, General Milley's great embarrassment about allowing the military to participate in the clearing of Lafayette Square Park for Trump's weird upside-down Bible march across the street. All right. Well, anyway, he regrets that they didn't beat up or kill enough or more people back then. Trump campaign spokesman Stephen Chung did not answer questions, of course, about specific actions under discussion, and then he gave a statement that had nothing to do with anything but criticized Biden and glorified Trump. The discussions underway reflect Trump's determination to harness the power of the presidency, even the powers of the presidency that don't exist, to exact revenge, that's the word they use, on those who have challenged or criticized him if he returns to the White House. The former president has frequently threatened to take punitive steps against his perceived enemies. That's true. He does frequently do that, arguing that doing so would be justified by the current prosecutions against him, even though the reason he's being prosecuted is that all of the threats that he's leveled in the past are unjustified and criminal and unconstitutional, and that's why you're on trial. But of course, if he could pardon himself from all of those things, well, then he would say, you made me sign a pardon for myself. Now you're really in for it. That's the kind of guy he is, and it's super dangerous and worrisome, and we had to at least mention it and talk about how dangerous it really is. And, wow, it's scary that this is real. Hi, everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Do we continue with the scary story? I mean, we really should, but there's plenty more to get to. But let's continue on with it for at least for a little while, if not necessarily for the entirety of the last segment. Where do we leave off? The discussions underway reflect Trump's determination to harness the power of the presidency, even where it doesn't exist, to, again, exact revenge on those who have challenged or criticized him if he returns to the White House. Former president has frequently threatened to take punitive steps against his perceived enemies, arguing that doing so would be justified because they're prosecuting him for his many crimes. Trump has claimed without evidence, of course, that the criminal charges he's facing, a total of 91 across 4 state and federal indictments, were made up to damage him politically. This is third world stuff. Arrest your opponent, Trump said at a campaign stop in New Hampshire in October. And amazingly, he follows that up with, and that means I can do that too. This is third world stuff. Terrible. Therefore, I will do it. And, well, okay, except not okay. Special counsel Jack Smith, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Biden have all said that Smith's prosecution decisions were made independently of the White House in accordance with department rules on special counsels. Trump, the clear polling leader in the GOP race, has made retribution, and that in quotes, retribution, a central theme of his campaign, seeking to intertwine his own legal defense with a call for payback against perceived slights and offenses to right-wing Americans in general. He repeatedly tells his supporters that he is being persecuted on their behalf, like Jesus, and holds out on a 2024 victory as a shared redemption at their enemies' expense. And the next section is titled, He is going to go after people that have turned on him. It is unclear what alleged crimes or evidence Trump would claim to justify investigating his named targets. Kelly said he would expect Trump to investigate him because since his Because since his term of chief of staff ended, I get you now, he has publicly criticized Trump, including by alleging that he called dead service members suckers. Remember that one? Kelly added, "There is no question in my mind he is going to go after people that have turned on him." Barr, another Trump appointee turned critic, has contradicted the former president's false claims about the 2020 election and called him a very petty individual who will always put his interests ahead of the country's. Asked about Trump's interest in prosecuting him, Barr deadpanned, "I'm quivering in my boots." Well, he'll probably skip the country and quiver elsewhere if necessary. Trump himself is more likely to rot in jail than anyone on his alleged list, said Cobb. I hope so. Who accused Trump of stifling truth, making threats, and bullying weaklings into doing his bidding. Milley did not comment. And, still the soldier in that one. Other modern presidents since the Watergate scandal, when Richard Nixon tried to suppress the FBI's investigation into his campaign's spying and sabotage against Democrats, have sought to separate politics from law enforcement. Presidents of both parties have imposed a White House policy restricting communications with prosecutors. An effort under the George W. Bush administration to remove U.S. attorneys for political reasons led to high-level resignations and a criminal investigation. But remember that even then, initially, reporters at the time, reporters of some note and others said, you're making a big deal out of nothing. There's no there, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know. Still, to me, nothing came of that in terms of actual accountability for it, which left the door open for Trump to do the same and more. The very next Republican administration to take up the mantle, in fact, picked up the ball where it was dropped at that point and said, what if I quadrupled down on this? Well, you might lose your race for a second term. Well, that's fine because we'll do a coup and then run for re-election on the promise that we will slaughter those who stood in our way the first time. Oh, awesome. I wish maybe we had done something way back when we still had a chance and there was no slaughter in the calculus. Rod Rosenstein, Trump-appointed Deputy Attorney General who oversaw the investigation by Mueller into Russian interference, said a politically ordered prosecution would, violate the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection under the law and could cause judges to dismiss the charges. That would be terrible. What's weird is I can't find a judge who's willing to enforce the 14th Amendment right now. But later, of course, the 14th Amendment will be enforced to our great, overwhelming joy. I'm sure everything will go smoothly when the then current president invokes the military to crack down on protesters and show up outside of courtrooms to make sure that judges rule the right way. But yeah, right now we can't find a judge who's willing to say, yes, the 14th Amendment means what it means. But I'm sure later when you need it, it'll be just fine. I have my doubts about that. Anyway, that constitutional defense, that is that these are politically ordered prosecutions violate the guarantee of equal protection under the law. Well, it's rarely been raised in U.S. history, Rosenstein said, so I'm not sure. It might be atrophied at this point, and of course, it's rarely been raised because for the last 50 years or so, they've been very wary about the possibility of even looking like they have ordered politically motivated prosecutions. Whereas this guy, the former guy who wants to be the next guy, says, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm telling you right now, that's going to be the MO of the next Trump Justice Department. Oh, goodness. Well, I guess we'll have to invoke it after all. Although it's been rare as a constitutional defense. We'll raise it, and we're pretty sure that we'll be able to take full advantage of the protections of the 14th Amendment, even though we are trying to take full advantage of the protections of the 14th Amendment right now in the face of an actual insurrection for which people are being sentenced for seditious conspiracy. But it doesn't seem to be working. It's too far-fetched. The press doesn't seem to love it. It's weird. Making prosecutorial decisions in a nonpartisan manner is essential to democracy, Rosenstein said. He's right. The White House should not be meddling in individual cases for political reasons. True. Hope we can do something about that. But Trump allies such as Russ Vought, remember we read about him in the They Want a New Kind of Lawyer article the other day. Well, Russ Vought, his former budget director who now leads the Center for Renewing America, but without a constitution, are actively repudiating the modern tradition of a measure of independence for the Department of Justice, arguing that such independence is not based in law or the Constitution. Vought is in regular contact with Trump and would be expected to hold a major position in a second term. You don't need statutory change at all. You need a mindset change. Unfortunately, he might be right about that. I don't know that there's a statute that would be violated by saying, the policy of separation of independence for the Justice Department is just that, a policy. Of course, it's just a policy that we don't prosecute sitting presidents too. And we have given Trump the benefit of the doubt on that one. And waited until he was out and then prosecuted him. But you have to prosecute him faster than he can run for office again and or overthrow the government, I guess. Which, to be fair, we have a pretty good idea of how long it'll take for him to run for president again, 4 years. How long will it take him to just overthrow everything? Well, I guess that could happen tomorrow. I don't know. There's no time limit on that one. There's no schedule built in. But okay, you don't need statutory change. You need a mindset change, i.e., to hell with normality, let's just do it, right? You need an attorney general and a White House counsel's office that don't view themselves as trying to protect the department from the president. Bad, but that's all it would take. Next up, a fixation on prosecuting enemies. Well, that seems to be the heart of it. As president, Kelly said, Trump would often suggest prosecuting his political enemies, or at least having the FBI investigate them. Kelly said he would not pass along requests to the Justice Department, but would alert the White House counsel's office. Usually they would ignore the orders, he said, and wait for Trump to move on. In a second term, Trump's aides could respond to such requests differently, he said. That's certainly entirely possible, although, again, probably the same play would be available to them. If they waited, if they just didn't do anything, Trump would almost certainly forget eventually. The lesson, well, although he does seem to hold grudges for a long time. It's just that he doesn't know what levers to pull, and he can't make people do things. He just stands around and tweets and yells. So nothing happens. Anyway, the lesson the former president learned from his first term is don't put guys like me in those jobs, Kelly said. The lesson he has learned was to find sycophants. Although, I gotta tell you, John, you looked an awful lot like a sycophant while you were there. You got fed up and left eventually, and then we heard stories about how frustrated you were the whole time. But taking the job, you never really got over that one. Although aides have worked on plans for some other agencies, Trump has taken a particular interest in the Justice Department, mostly because they're prosecuting him. I guess if he were losing agricultural subsidies along the way, he'd be angry at the Agriculture Department too. In conversations about a potential second term, Trump has made picking an attorney general his number one priority, according to a Trump advisor. He picked like 3 or 4 of them and didn't get what he needed out of any of them. Given his recent trials and tribulations, one would think he's going to pick up the plan for the Department of Justice before doing some light reading, or the idea that he would do that, of a 500-page white paper on reforming the EPA, said Matt Mowers, maybe? I don't know. A former White House advisor. I think I read that and I got lost in it. I don't know. Who is this guy? Given his recent trials and tribulations, one would think he's going to pick up the plan for the Department of Justice before doing some light reading. Okay. So like that he would make that a priority? It's a dumb way of saying it. Jeffrey Clark, a fellow at Vought's think tank, that's where he landed, is leading the work on the Insurrection Act under Project 2025. It didn't work for him the first time, but he's going to get it right this time. The Post has reported that Clark is one of 6 unnamed co-conspirators whose actions are described in Trump's indictment in the federal election interference case. Clark was also charged in Fulton County, Georgia, by name, with violating the state anti-racketeering law and attempting to create a false statement as part of the district attorney's case accusing Trump and co-conspirators of interfering in the 2020 election. Clark has pleaded not guilty. As a Justice Department official after the 2020 election, Clark, of course, pressured superiors to investigate non-existent election crimes and to encourage state officials to submit phony certificates to the Electoral College, according to the indictment. In one conversation described in the federal indictment, a deputy White House counsel warned Clark that Trump's refusing to leave office would lead to riots in every major city, and Clark responded, "That's why there's an Insurrection Act. We would just kill those people who are protesting in every city." Clark had dinner with Trump during a visit to his Bedminster, New Jersey golf club this summer. He also went to Pervalago on Wednesday for a screening of a new Dinesh D'Souza movie. I can't believe there are such things. That, of course, because it's a Dinesh D'Souza movie, uses falsehoods, misleading interviews, and dramatizations to allege federal persecution of January 6th rioters and Christians. Also attending were fringe allies such as Stephen K.G.B. Bannon, Roger Stone, Laura Loomer, and Michael Flynn. Bayraktar. Anyway, I think that the supposedly independent DOJ is an illusion, Clark said in an interview. Through a spokeswoman, he did not respond to follow-up questions about his work on the Insurrection Act. Clark's involvement with Project 2025 has alarmed some other conservative lawyers who view him as an unqualified choice to take a senior leadership role at the department. According to a conservative lawyer who spoke on condition of anonymity, Project 2025 compromises 75 groups in a collaboration organized by the Heritage Foundation. Project 2025 director Paul Dans stood by Clark in a statement. "We're grateful for Jeff Clark's willingness to share his insights from having worked at high levels in the government during trying times," for which he was indicted. After online publication of this story, Rob Bluey, a Heritage spokesman, said there are no plans within Project 2025 related to the Insurrection Act or targeting political enemies. So a nice denial being issued by Rob Bluey, whom I appeared opposite at one point on, what was it? C-SPAN Washington Journal. Is that what they call their programs? We were on, I don't know. I think it was probably about healthcare issues at the time, and they were debating, Obamacare passage. And he was their blogger, and then they wanted someone from, we'll have a balanced approach. We'll have one lunatic who's going to eventually work for the overthrow of the United States government under the aegis of it being heritage. It's not hate, it's heritage. We don't hate the Constitution. We just want to heritage it to death. Anyway, they put him on and they put me on because balance. There you go. And now he's still at Heritage 200 years later. And whatever. Once you get on the dole with these guys, you just, all you have to do is knuckle under and stay on. They take care of you for life. Anyway, how a second Trump term would differ from the first? Well, it would be openly fascist, I guess. And all the things that we told you that he would do, like murdering everybody, there you go. I'm sorry, prosecute everybody. But as we know, he told you pretty early on he could shoot people in the middle of Fifth Avenue without losing any voters. Although, as it turns out, if he gets convicted of shooting them, he could lose 6% of his votes. There is that. There's heated debate in conservative legal circles about how to interact with Trump as the likely nominee. That's going to be the most amazing period of all, right? Somewhere, at some point, he's going to be the nominee, and there's going to be several months of American press just pretending, yep, two-party system in this country, and one party says, I'm going to murder the other party. And we're supposed to just go, well, I guess eventually we'll have calls for a ceasefire eventually. You've murdered 200,000 Democrats. Well, let's get a ceasefire in place here. And then you just, continue to rule the country. Well, the Russians will ask for it, and people will sign on too. And it might even sound like a good idea to us at the time. It would be nice if they stopped firing at some point. And some people would say, well, now you know what it feels like, I guess. But they might be dead too, so It's a bad deal all around. We don't like this. Let's see. Where were we? Right. Many in Trump circles have disparaged what they view as institutionalist Republican lawyers, particularly those associated with the Federalist Society. So here the Jacobins come, I guess, and or the Bolsheviks and slaughter all the counter-revolutionary Bolsheviks who aren't left enough, Some Trump advisors consider these individuals, the Federalist Society, too soft and accommodating to make the kind of changes within agencies that they want to see happen in a second Trump administration. It's not enough to be a psycho right-wing lawyer. It's, why are you adhering to the strictures of the law at all? We want to murder our political enemies. Let's stop looking for insurrection acts or whatever that say it's okay and just do the murders. And then you pardon us. That's the law we're interested in. Trump has told advisors that he is looking for lawyers who are loyal to him to serve in a second term. Of course, he's always looking for that. Complaining about his White House counsel's unwillingness to go along with some of his ideas in his first term or to help him in his bid to overturn the 2020 election defeat. In repeated comments to advisors and lawyers around him, Trump has said his biggest regrets were naming Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr as his attorneys general and listening to others. So he had two shots at it. I only hire the best people. All right. Who are you going to hire for AG? Jeff Sessions. Oh my God, major disappointment. That won't happen again. Bill Barr. Oh my God, major disappointment. That won't happen again. Mr. You're fired. Mr. I only hire the best people. But that doesn't matter then. Even the 6% who are waiting for a conviction still think that's okay. Well, anyway, let's see. He often cites the Federalist Society, who wanted him to name lawyers with impressive pedigrees and Ivy League credentials to senior Justice Department positions as part of his enemies list, I guess. He's mentioned to several lawyers who have defended him on TV or he has mentioned the people who defend him on TV or who attack Biden, that they'd be good candidates for attorney general, according to people familiar with his comments. Doesn't matter if you're a parking lot attorney, a traffic court attorney. If you go on TV and criticize Biden and praise him, he will say you're a constitutional scholar and should be attorney general. So if you're out of work, go do that. Then you'll be attorney general. And if you're one of our guys, secretly, then you can help us out by not carrying out his orders. But as long as you go on TV and say these things, you get to remain AG, I guess. The overall vision that Trump, his campaign, and outside allies are now discussing for a second term would differ from his first term in terms of how quickly and forcefully officials would move to execute his orders. I guess that's one way of describing a difference. Alumni involved in the current planning generally fault a slow start, bureaucratic resistance, and litigation for hindering the president's agenda in his first term, and they are determined to avoid these hurdles if given a second chance by concentrating more power in the West Wing and selecting appointees who will carry out Trump's demands. Meaning, if they lose in court, they'll get rid of the judge, possibly burn the opinion, maybe arrest everybody who seeks to enforce it, and then dare the next judge to do differently. These groups are in discussions with Trump's campaign advisors and occasionally the candidate himself, sometimes circulating policy papers on draft executive orders, according to people familiar with the situation, if they still like to play the paper game. No one is opposed to putting together ideas, but it's not us, a campaign advisor said. These groups say they'll have the whole transition planned. Some of these people, I'm sure, are good and Trump will appoint, but it's not what's on his mind right now. I'm sure he'd be fine with some of their orders. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Trump's core group of West Wing advisors for a second term is widely expected to include Stephen Miller, the architect of Trump's hardline immigration policies, including family separation, who's gone on to challenge Biden administration policies in court, although why he uses courts, I don't know. Alumni have also saved lists of previous appointees who would not be welcome in a second Trump administration and will end up arrested, as well as career officials that they viewed as uncooperative and who they would seek to fire based on an executive order to weaken civil service protections. For other appointments, Trump would be able to draw on lineups of personnel prepared by Project 25 2025. Dan's, a former Office of Personnel Management Chief of Staff, likened the database to a conservative LinkedIn. Everything's a conservative something else, right? Allowing applicants to present their resumes on public profiles while also providing a shared workspace for heritage and partner organizations to vet the candidates and make recommendations. We don't want careerists. We don't want people who are opportunists. We want conservative warriors. Except, of course, that means being an opportunist. But, all right. So, just letting you know that you need to be aware that a second Trump administration would likely mean, as I said, arrest, incarceration, exile, execution for political opponents more or less across the board. And gee whiz, I guess you got to start planning for it. And I guess, once again, time to start thinking about, well, in an emergency, what country do I think I might be able to get into and land on my feet if the United States essentially collapses? Well, just got to think about these things. And as long as we're now reaching the point where it's okay to have headlines like that Trump basically plans that his platform is going to be personal revenge and the political prosecution and maybe worse of everybody that he perceives to have been an enemy from the beginning of time and going forward, then you need to also normalize, hey, shouldn't we have shot him on January 7th? Really shouldn't have been the Ceausescu exit for Donald Trump. Wouldn't that have been better? Because Romania does not have this problem. No one is saying that there's going to be a return of Ceausescu and that he's going to challenge the boundaries of the legal underpinnings of the state. Because he's dead. It doesn't happen that way. So, and if you're squeamish about it, I invite you to use the picture of the Trump Mustang and the Trump Mustang hashtag, and wink, wink, everybody will eventually know what that means. But the fact that there are people actively working about this, although they are working with claims or requests for anonymity, so they're at least somewhat embarrassed about this. Although I guess maybe it's this. They're saying, well, if we are clearing the way for the arrest, prosecution, exile, execution, what have you, of political opponents, I guess it would be wise not to appear on the record and give everybody our name, because other people might make a list of us and get rid of us at some point. Although, as it turns out, most people are saying, well, no, that would be so terrible. We don't want that. So go ahead, I guess, and be on the record. Except, I don't know, if we ever change our minds and say there really needs to be retribution for the sake of the continuance of the United States as we know it and justice under the Constitution, well then, yeah, you'll probably find yourself in trouble. Okay, almost time for us to wrap things up and head out for the day. What might we want to add to the mix here at this point? Gosh, the day has gone by so quickly, and tomorrow, of course, will be Election Day. I don't know. Do we have enough time for any of these things? Let's try throwing this in here. We'll return to the other figure of weirdness of the day, Mike Johnson. I thought this was an interesting view of things from the New Republic. Melissa Gira Grant. Is it Gira? I don't know. I'm sorry about mispronouncing the middle name if that happened. Mike Johnson, remember that guy? Has a dangerous victim complex. All right, so another explanation of, okay, what's the danger that we're talking about with his weirdness? What links his election denial and his anti-gay policies, if you're wondering what the connection is there, is his belief that he is, you've heard this before from other Christian conservatives, a member of a persecuted minority. Oh, womp womp. White male Christians. The most persecuted minority of all time, in their view. But, interestingly, as they point out here, well, long story short, this one, he is sure that white male Christians are, at the same time, both the world's, or at least this country's, most persecuted minority, and also at the same time under democratic principles? No, but theocratic principles, or might makes right, or hey, we killed the most people, whatever it is, in addition to being the most persecuted minority, is also legally, morally, theocratically entitled to rule this country. We're a minority, but we'll also rule. Why is that okay and American? Because we fundamentally at bottom do not believe in democracy. Because in democracies, minorities don't rule. They get protected, yes, so that they can exist and contest their ideas, run their ideas against the ideas of everyone else, or seek to build a coalition that might put them within reach of ruling, but that's too hard. God wants us to kill you all so that we can rule. Or, as he puts it, Christ calls us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But more or less as a Halloween costume, I guess. Wrote Mike Johnson on a creationist website in 2015. This story begins. Johnson, who became Speaker of the House last week, was counseling his fellow Christians on how to live in a new and hostile world, as he put it, where the Supreme Court had just recently recognized the right of same-sex couples to marry. That's why it was so hostile, you see. He positioned himself and fellow believers as members of a persecuted minority who would need to present themselves carefully if they were going to prevail. And then what was interesting was the idea of presenting yourself carefully became, we should basically let everybody know that we don't care about the rule of law. We're pretty sure God ordered us to get rid of our enemies, and we're going to do it. That's not very careful, nor is it harmless as doves. But, as they point out here, Johnson is no harmless dove, nor a wise serpent. Maybe that's good. He is a man who has been steadily accruing political and religious power, largely outside the limelight, for years. When he assumed the speakership of the House of Representatives last week, it seemed to be despite, or perhaps precisely because, he had effectively assumed the guise he once advised fellow Christians to take. A nice guy. One who knows how to make shrewd moves with an air of absolute innocence. And now, even as he stands second in line to the presidency, Johnson hopes to retain the role of the righteously persecuted, which is how I guess everybody in Shreveport feels. He didn't come out of nowhere, unless the political workings, of the Christian right are in some nowhere zone, as can seem the case with much political reporting. But the journalist Sarah Posner recently wrote that she first encountered Johnson back in 2007, and at the time Johnson insisted to me that Christians were the ones facing discrimination, recalled Posner. All the way back in 2007, she reported that. He was then, of course, working for the Alliance Defending Freedom. You know all about them, and look what they've done in the years since. Kudos again to Sarah Posner for her work on this.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time to hand things over now to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Of course, he'll be hitting the former guy as well. Trump is going to perjure himself one way or another when he takes the stand in his New York civil fraud trial. Remember, that is actually taking place. I know we distracted you with all the other stuff, but that's the big news of the day, and then we'll see you tomorrow, Election Day. Stay tuned.